All right, so good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another exciting program with us here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, like our speaker today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world, and we are so thrilled to be bringing you this program today. I think we're on program number 80 of the year so far. It's been crazy. Joe and I haven't slept a lick, but it's been so fun sharing the world of science and exploration with so many amazing classes around the globe. Now, in the month of November, we have classically always done a whole slew of incredible space events. And if you've caught us on YouTube, all our programs stay live on YouTube forever. You will have seen all sorts of amazing NASA engineers working to explore the cosmos. And today is no exception with our last space program of the month, here with Dr. Crawford. So she is a flight systems engineer at NASA's fabled Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one of the most amazing places on this planet for scientists, engineers, roboticists, and so many more. She gets to work to help get spacecraft to other worlds. The fact that we explore other worlds at all is really one of the crowning achievements of mankind. And so today, we are lucky enough to hear from a person who gets to work to make that possible, that incredible dream possible. And so, I'm going to stop talking soon. It's not about me. I'm so excited to turn it over to Dr. Crawford to blow your mind with all the exciting stuff she gets up to. And so, welcoming in Pasadena, California, Dr. Crawford, welcome to the broadcast today.
Hello. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's so exciting to get to hear these stories. I know you've got a lot to share with us today, so if you want to dive in with the presentation, we are good to go. But yeah, classes all over Ontario, New York today, China even. It's a really exciting audience, and I can't wait for them to hear your story.
Well, I'm so excited. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Give me a hot second while I bring up the presentation.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Drum roll, please.
Yeah. I won't do the whole Jeopardy theme song. I'll get in trouble. But here we go. This is fantastic. Spacecraft power. I'm ready.
Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so thank you, Jesse, for the wonderful introduction. As Jesse mentioned, my name is Dr. Crawford, and I get to work at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, which is this beautiful campus here. We have these rolling mountains in the back. We're out in California, Pasadena, California, where the sun is always shining and people are always so nice. So as a quick overview, we'll just do a really quick snippet about me, and then we're going to talk about spacecraft power, the spacecraft that I've been able to work on, and how we make spacecraft better. And then we're going to talk a little bit about my journey into STEM, because I think it's always really important to show, how we get to where we are as scientists. So this is me. I'm really short. So I'm trying to peer over into an astronaut's little hidey hole, but I'm on my tiptoes even, but we're trying. So I grew up in a really small town in Virginia. There were probably more cows than there were people, but it made for fun adventuring. And pretty recently, I received my doctorate degree in something called material science at the Colorado School of Mines out in Golden, Colorado at Mines. And during that time, I was researching materials to make spacecraft better. And now I am officially a flight systems engineer at the NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory out here in Pasadena, California, where we've shifted focus from working on space power to thinking about how do we get the spacecraft to be operational once they're in space. So we're going to be focusing on the power side of things today, but I'm more than happy to talk about the work that I'm currently doing too. So what is it exactly that I do in STEM? So material science is this wonderful blend of all of these different scientists. So you might think of, chemistry or physics or mathematics, and they're these one-off topics. But if you blend them all together, you have the wonderful field of material science. So it's this really unique thing that lets us to describe how materials operate in the world. So you can think of all solids, like your cell phone, being made up as this beautiful network of all of these individual systems. And you can think of these things as little tiny Legos. And as we put all the Legos together, then we have different materials, and those materials have different properties. So we, as material scientists, get to figure out how to build the Legos of the world. So if we take our cell phone, for example, we want the front of our cell phone to be glass, but the back of the cell phone is metal. So we have these different sort of Lego building blocks because we have something that's glass and something that's metal. But when engineers come to design devices, they need to turn to the material scientists of the world and say, hey, I really want this type of property for this thing I'm trying to design. What material should I use? And so in the front of the phone, it's really critical that we can see through it, right? We want to be able to look at the things. We want to be able to look at, the apps, the maps, and everything in between. So we have to have a trade-off of being able to see through it versus how fragile it is. So we're constantly sort of balancing back and forth, because if I throw my phone on the ground, like some people may know, then your phone breaks. So this fragility that it comes with being able to see through it is this sort of balancing act that material scientists have to play with. So, we have good things, but then we have to sort of weigh the bad things. So material scientists play a game in every material that we touch. So whether that be spacecraft, whether that be, Nintendo Switches, the houses, the cars you drive in, everything that you see in the world is sort of touched by a material scientist, which is really cool. But personally, I'm a material scientist for space technologies. So this was the Martian Perseverance rover. So this is when it was getting built up in the high bay. So this is the actual rover that got sent to Mars. I got to go see it. We were building it here at NASA JPL. So this is that getting built before we sent it off to Mars. And this is me with a mock-up of that rover. So specifically, I work on something called radioisotope thermoelectric generators, which is a big mouthful and a fancy word for just basically saying the power source for certain space missions. So on Perseverance, like this little guy here, that's this RTG. That's this little finned capsulated thing here in the back. And what this does is it powers the entire spacecraft. So when we're taking pictures of the surface of Mars, like how you put AAA batteries in a remote, this is essentially our AAA battery for a spacecraft, and that's called an RTG. So what's the point? What is a material scientist doing looking at this weird little fin structure? So when we take photos of Mars, we have these applications, and those applications sort of can trickle down into smaller and smaller technologies. We have the whole thing on Mars. We have the whole system that's built. Then we just look at the actual battery itself and we say, what's this battery made out of? What's inside this battery? And that's something called thermocouples. And so my job was to try to make the thermocouples in this system better, because if they were better, then we could convert heat into electricity more efficiency. So thermocouples and thermoelectric materials are these really cool types of materials that can convert heat into electricity. So that allows us to harness heat and to power the spacecraft. And so if we can make those systems better, we can have cooler, longer missions on space. So there's a really awesome video that one of my bosses made. So we're going to watch it.
If you want to drive a rover on Mars, you have to keep in mind, there's no gas station for millions of miles, and there's no outlet to plug into for power. That's why NASA's Curiosity rover on Mars and other NASA spacecraft that explore the solar system use something called radioisotope power. A radioactive substance releases heat as it breaks down or decays. A system that converts that heat into electricity is called a radioisotope power system. These systems get fancy names. Curiosity's power system is called the MMRTG, Multi-Mission Radioisotope Thermoelectric Generator. MMRTGs are reliable and last a long time. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory is working with the Department of Energy on ways to make them even more powerful and capable. So researchers want to make the next generation of radioisotope power systems, the eMMRTG. The E stands for enhanced. The new thermoelectric technology in development is based upon materials called scutter-rudites. They are a part of a family of compounds with many heavy atoms and complex structures. Scutter-rudites conduct electricity like a metal, but insulate against heat the way glass does. At the same time, they can generate sizable electrical voltages, just what engineers need to convert heat into electricity. Engineers use this material in devices called thermocouples, which are used to generate electricity. One of the thermocouple shoes is hot and one is cold. This heat, transferred across a big temperature difference, makes electrical charges flow from the hot shoe to the cold shoe and produces an electrical voltage, and this generates useful electrical power. If these materials were put in the same kind of generator that's on the Curiosity rover with some small tweaks, the generator could be up to 25% more efficient. After 17 years, a spacecraft could have 50% more power than with the current design. That means a spacecraft with an eMMRTG could fly longer and do more science during its lifetime. This kind of research could help us on Earth too. For example, some of the heat that gets wasted when you drive your car could be reused and put back into the car to charge the battery or power electronics. JPL is collaborating with leading U.S. material scientists to design and study even more advanced, high-temperature thermoelectric materials. So next time you need to replace your car battery, think about how NASA spacecraft can't replace their batteries. But as we improve radioisotope power systems, they can go for longer and longer, powered by heat, even in the cold expanse of space.
Great. So RTGs are these really cool technology, and we've been using RTGs in NASA for over 50 years. So an RTG was actually used on the Apollo missions. So you can see one of the Apollo astronauts has an RTG here used to help power one of the Apollo modules. When we took pictures of Pluto and we got to see Pluto for some of the first times, and it's beautiful little heart-shaped, that spacecraft that we sent, New Horizons, was powered by an RTG. So if we're able to make longer, more long-lasting power systems, then we can go to cooler places in the solar system. My favorite, personally, is the Voyager 1 and the Voyager 2 missions, which have RTGs. And these spacecraft are so far, they've escaped the solar system. I think they're past the heliopause. And so it's this thing that we've made that has an RTG on it that is still just trucking into the vast expanses of space, trying to find any other signal of life out there. So there are other options too when we think about powering spacecraft. RTGs are not the only way that we can power spacecraft. We can harness the energy from the sun and use solar panels. So the Martian InSight lander that was probing the depths of the Martian surface used solar panels. And then the Martian Opportunity rover also used solar panels too. But there's this balancing act of when do we know what type of system to use with what type of spacecraft. And that depends on where we're going. It depends on what type of science we're trying to do. And, if we're able to harness the sun. So we as power technicians at NASA have to decide what's the optimal way that we want to power our spacecraft. So I mentioned before, what do I work on now? So I've walked a little bit away from the power system world, but I am now on a mission called NISAR, which is an Earth observation satellite that's going to launch in about 2 years. And it is powered by solar panels. So we're going to use the power of the sun to be able to power this entire spacecraft as it sweeps across our planet and is taking pictures across the globe, trying to track topological changes of climate change, of movement for hurricanes and glacier movement and monsoons. And we right now are building that spacecraft at JPL. So this is the spacecraft about a month ago in our high bay as we're building it up. So now I'm in charge of trying to figure out a way to make sure that this spacecraft survives when it gets to space. As a flight systems engineer, what that means is that my job gets to basically take the brain and the heart of the spacecraft and say, I need to make sure that the brain and the heart are in good working order when we go to launch, and everything is working smoothly. So this is NISAR, and then after NISAR launches, I'll get to be on a whole new mission and do the whole thing over again, where we get to basically make sure that our spacecraft are getting up into space safely. So, like I mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about, what my path was to where I am today, because I think that's really important to think about, how do we, as NASA engineers, get to where we are? What was my trajectory if I was a spacecraft? So, like I said, I was born and raised in a small town in Virginia. So I was really close to the Appalachian Trail. I did a lot of hiking growing up. And when I left high school, I knew that I wanted to go to college. So I went to the University of Virginia, and I actually started to go to school for a major in fine art. I love painting and I love drawing. And I knew that I sort of liked science, but so I wanted a minor in chemistry. But when I got to college, I will tell you, I hated learning art in a formal setting, and I pretty much failed my first chemistry class. So I was scratching my head thinking, maybe I'm not cut out for either of these two things. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm failing, maybe literally. So what to do next? And I had this really lovely person who was with the University of Virginia who sat me down and said, you really love art, you really love science, maybe you should think about becoming an engineer. And to this day, I've never really looked back. So I transferred into the School of Engineering to study aerospace engineering, which is where I got my bachelor's. So in 2015, I graduated. And that experience allowed me to do a bunch of cool things. I worked for the NASA Center out in Virginia, doing strategic communications. I got to, hang out on the Air Force Base, meet astronauts, go to different conferences. And then ultimately, I ended up going to Colorado to get my doctorate in material science engineering in 2015, where I stayed there for about 6 years to get my doctorate. And then I ended up getting a full-time position as a flight systems engineer at NASA JPL on the NISAR mission that we just saw pictures of. And during my time in grad school, I was sort of constantly back and forth between JPL and Mines, so it was a lot of traveling, but it was really fun, and JPL, like we said, is this gorgeous, beautiful campus where everybody is working on so many different exciting things and so many different exciting spacecraft that it's really just a sort of joy to be here. But I think one of my lessons learned that I'd like to leave people with is that there are so much failure. If I had gone to college and said, I have failed my chemistry class, I am going to quit, then that would have been the end of my trajectory. But there's a lot of failure in science, and that's okay, because you get to learn a lot of things through different types of failure. And something that really struck me was, you don't have to be stuck behind a microscope to be a scientist or an engineer. As an engineer, I've been able to do so many different cool things. I've gotten to scuba dive off the coast of the Great Barrier Reef, I go skydiving, meeting wombats, going to Paris, and eating croissants at the Eiffel Tower. So being an engineer takes on like a whole bunch of different flavors, and it's a really rewarding career. So I just hope that you guys think about it. So also, you are your biggest advocate. So there are so many mentors that you will find across your way when you're going through your journey, and that these people really shape the rest of your life. So I've been really fortunate to have people who really believed at me at the sort of different pivotal moments that have helped me along the way. And you can't do sort of these journeys alone. So when you find people that are, really excited about the work that you're doing, and, most people are here to help out, these people are priceless. So can't say that enough. And, we get to have lives outside of being an engineer. My whole life isn't wrapped up into being an engineer. I still love art. I still draw all the time. I love photography and traveling and helping, diversity outside of STEM. So it's really fun to be a part of something that's really beautiful. So with that, I'll take any questions. And it was super exciting to talk to you guys today. And thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you so much, Caitlin. That was spectacular. If you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation, I'll give you a second to do that. But that was marvelous. And I love the lesson of sort of being willing to fail. This is something that we've actually seen in quite a few of our broadcasts lately. And I love emphasizing that you can get a D- in chemistry. You can utterly, completely change your career tack halfway through and you think that, oh, I'm set on this path in your 20s and your 30s even, and end up doing something that's really fulfilling and exciting. So I'm really glad you took the time to highlight all that. I'm going to give our live classes just a second to mull over some questions for you, but I want to start with a reference to a bit of SciComm that some of our students might be familiar with. RTG is what Mark Watney in The Martian went and took to heat his rover, right? Okay, cool.
Yes.
I was like, I know I've heard that acronym before. That honestly, it's just like Jurassic Park made a generation of paleontologists. I swear The Martian's going to make a generation of engineers, but you can do anything. You can save your life. It's very exciting. Anyway, I'm going to leave it to the kids. So Miss Simmons' class, welcome in, guys. If you guys want to dive in with a question, it's so nice to have you here in Rhinebeck. Come on in, unmute your mic, and you are good to go. Welcome in, guys. Yes, hi. Come chat with us, but you got to unmute. Otherwise, it's too quiet. And it's just me talking, and nobody wants that. But yeah, your microphone symbol at the bottom of the screen. Miss Miller's class, if you guys want to unmute in the background too, you're good in the background. We can't hear you until we bring you in. Hey! Hi! Do any of you have a question for Caitlin?
If you have a question, raise your hand, guys.
Oh, someone.
Keon, go ahead. What's your question, buddy?
Wait, can you hear me?
We can hear you, just you have to talk loudly.
Do you do anything else besides work at NASA?
Any other side gigs? Are you driving, picking up food for anyone? What's going on?
My full-time job is with NASA. I do spend a lot of time volunteering and working at an art community center. So it's local artists come and get to, help draw and teach people how to draw and paint. So that is sort of my bread and butter, my sort of side gig, if you will, is to just go hang out with a bunch of artists.
Fantastic. Sounds good to me. I'm actually on the art note. So I always love when people have a bit of an art background. I think it makes them better scientists. We've had a lot of people that are sort of cutting edge in their field and they have that art backdrop. Now, NASA, even in the video, you had these fantastic drawings used as representations for science communication. One of my favorite things NASA's ever done is something called the Visions of the Future series, which envisions heading to other worlds as a tourist destination. So I really encourage classes to check that out too. Do you get to use your artistic talents for anything with NASA, or are you too busy doing hardcore?
Well, so, we as engineers get to talk about our science all the time, right? And so there are different subtle ways that art makes, undertone in all of these things, which is, when I get to present my science, I'm always including little doodles in there and, personifying spacecraft with smiley faces on them. And my coworkers are like, oh, it's cute. But, I'd like to argue that engineering is a form of art.
Yep. I like that very much. Caitlin, let's head to Miss Miller's class, joining us today in Ontario. If you guys want to unmute your mic, you are good to go to come in live. Hi, guys. NASA shirt. There's a NASA shirt. Yes, way to go. Come on up, unmute. We'd love to hear a question from you guys. There we are. Hi.
So my first question is, what are the purposes of the two rovers, Curiosity and Perseverance, and how do those rovers achieve their purpose?
Cool.
Oh, this is a great question. Okay, so Curiosity first. We sent Curiosity over there sort of as a scouting mission. We were like, where do we want to go? Where on Mars would we want to explore? What does the terrain look like? I'm going to take pictures. I'm going to try to sample some of the soil, and I'm going to putz around. So there's this huge suite of instruments on both of the rovers, scientific instruments that allows it to do that, right? There's a camera, there's a microscope, there's some data collection. And so that was Curiosity. And then Perseverance was saying, Curiosity was really cool. Now let's go send another rover. And we want to bring samples back. So Perseverance actually has this tiny little drill on it that is drilling the surface of Mars and collecting all these samples. And the next mission that happens, we're going to collect all of the samples and bring them back to Earth. So, whatever the next Martian mission is, it'll be collecting all of those little samples that Perseverance has put on the surface.
So for kids that are really keen to know more about that specifically, we had Matt Heverly on earlier in the month, and he talked about the Mars Sample Return Mission, an amazing program. So I really encourage you to check out his talk too. And again, just like this one, everything we do is on our YouTube channel. So just go there, type in the name, you're good to go. If you want to watch Caitlin like 50 more times, share it with family and friends. The more the merrier, don't choke. YouTube classes, if you guys are want to not be shy, or feel free to share questions in the chat. But we got one via email, a class that couldn't come, the teacher got sick, but they wanted to know about clean rooms. Whenever they see engineers, always people in like a white lab coat, they got the white hairnet, they look like they're preparing some hardcore food or in a hospital. Why is that?
That's a great question. So clean rooms are this really cool environment. So imagine you step into, your living room, and you have all of these things that are around you in the room. There's all this dust. There's all of, maybe you have a dog. There's all this dog hair. We as scientists, when we're trying to model certain environments, like if I wanted to model my living room, then I would need to be in a room that had all the dog hair with it. So clean rooms are this really cool controlled environment that we as scientists are sort of controlling the pressure, the temperature, because the science that we're trying to do in that room is trying to model, this really fancy environment. And the reason you see people wearing, the bunny suits, as they're called, like the all white suits, and their hair's all up in a hairnet, is because in those types of environment, we can't have hair coming out and tampering samples. We can't have dust floating around for contamination purposes. So on the Martian surface, let's say, if we're trying to model Mars and trying to do sort of science that we don't intersect and ruin some tiny bit of samples, then we have to be really cautious of where we do that science.
I'm so glad you mentioned the dog hair thing. So when I grew up, I had a dog that had so much shedding that it was like tumbleweeds would roll across my living room and it'd be horrible. So we want to avoid that sort of thing. And a lot of hardcore science, actually particle physicists we've had on the broadcast before, so they have to have really clean room environments. When you're doing very detailed stuff with like a lot of components or very delicate components, it's very important to maintain a clean environment. Weird segue too. I want classes when you're done, look up a guy named Claire Patterson, who's the most important scientist none of you have ever heard of. In the very first clean room and did a lot of other really world-changing things in the 50s and 60s. So, Caitlin, if you've never heard of Claire Patterson, most people haven't.
Me neither.
Very exciting guy. I can tell you after we're done the broadcast, after we're done live. It's very fun. Classes, we're going to go back to Miss Simmons' class. If you guys want to unmute your mic again, you are good to go. Come on in, guys, and take us away. Hey. Hi. Hi, but do you have a question for us?
I do.
You do. Well, then share it.
Well, my question is though, at the start, like with the video, when you said there was like, when NASA had the battery generators that were generating power by heat. Well, why don't they use that for like houses or stuff?
Yes, another heat for a house. Good question.
It's a good question. So the system itself is, honestly, it's really expensive. And to be honest, it's not super efficient. And so when we power our houses, it's a little bit cheaper. And it's pretty easy to basically plug into something and be like, hey, we're basically pooling electricity from this city that we have. Unfortunately, like we said, when we go to Mars, we don't have this grid on Mars that we can sort of plug into. And so the options that we're left with are unfortunately like a little bit more expensive and not as good as it would be to just plug in your house into the grid network. That being said, that's why part of our job is to make this system better, because if we could make it cheaper for everyday use, then there is nothing really stopping us from converting the heat, let's say, that your house is wasting into some form of electricity to power a toaster or something.
I love all the technologies that are going into exactly this around the globe. Like, it's a really exciting time to be interested in alternative energy generation in terms of and efficiency as well. Things like that, where you're recycling. There's a term for it that I can't for the life of me think of right now. It's not carbon capture and storage. It's something capture and storage. Anyway, but I'm glad we got the chance to highlight that. And great question, guys. Miss Miller's class, coming back to you live. Again, YouTube classes, if you don't have accounts, you won't be able to share questions in the chat. But if you do, please do feel free. We'd love to hear from you there. Miss Miller, come on in.
So I heard that NASA has found an asteroid heading towards the Earth.
Yeah. And are you wondering if it's going to hit us or just what's going on with it?
Like, my question is, which part of the Earth is going to hit it?
Well, it's a good question. So I will say that the vastness of space, there's all of these different things all over the place, right? There are asteroids, there are rocks, there are comets, and there are people at NASA who are constantly monitoring the Earth to make sure that asteroids are not going to hit us. And so as we stand currently, there are no asteroids that are going to hit us. So I think we're going to be safe for a little bit, and it's not going to hit any part of the Earth. So we're good to go.
I will encourage our classes, the group that Caitlin's talking about is the Center for Near Earth Object Studies. And recently, too, we had the incredible DART mission. So we tested what would happen if something was heading for the Earth and we wanted to deflect it by slamming a spacecraft right into it, which is like a car crash in space. It's ridiculous, but it worked very, very well. So I really encourage our groups to check that out. Caitlin, when it comes to rovers and Mars and these missions to other worlds, I think a lot of our classes and certainly the public are familiar now with this image of a bunch of engineers and scientists, and they're sitting at the control thing and they're waiting for it to land, and then it lands and they're so excited and there's crying and cheering and it's the best day ever. Do you have a particularly fulfilling moment? I mean, you've had the chance to work on some really, really cool missions and projects. Is there something that really stands out to you as being the most special experience you've had in this field?
Oh, man, that is such a good question. So I will say preemptively, I think that moment will happen when we launch the mission upcoming, the NISAR mission. So I think that moment is really going to happen in 2 years. In my past experience, watching Perseverance land was just so we were crying. Everybody was stoked. To all of the work that takes, a system to get to the surface of Mars is so crazy. And I remember when I was, I think I was in high school when Curiosity landed, and I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And then when Perseverance landed, and there was this moment of, the science that I work on is helping this instrument potentially get there. Was like, we've done it.
And it's so, again, now it's at the point where it's happened so often that it's sort of not blasé, but like people are like, kids grow up these days expecting, wow, there's things on Mars. There were things on Mars when we were born. There's more things going to Mars. And I mean, that is really the level of precision, engineering, scientific, and technological talent that went into that over decades to allow that to be possible, where we can send a mission to Mars, not with an assurance of success, but with a high level of confidence that we're going to be able to land there and continue this exploration and discovery on another planet, is unbelievable. So kudos to you and for the team that have made this possible. It's really exciting. It's for our kids today, it's the best time ever to be interested in space, whether you're interested in robotics, looking for life elsewhere in the universe, going back to the moon, going to Mars. I mean, kids that are grade 5 in these classes today, you're going to be the astronauts that go to Mars, kids your age, which is thrilling. So it'll be beyond robotic exploration to this new world that's opening up. Anyway, I could wax mystical all day long, but I will note that the NISAR mission, so if you want to check out the link, it's below on the screen. NASA does a better job of sharing the magic of science with the public than any institution on this planet. They have beautiful, beautiful websites. If you want to dive in and learn more about Caitlin's mission, I highly encourage you to do so. Caitlin, time flies when you're having fun. We're going to take 2 more questions from our live groups here, and then we'll wrap up from there. But Miss Simmons' class, if you guys want to unmute for one more time, come on in and go for it. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Does anybody have a question?
Okay,
Connor,
question. Connor, you got a question?
Hey,
buddy?
Connor.
Question. In science, does everything have to be exact?
Ooh.
Great question. No, so definitely not. So there are, of course, there are things of, mathematics. 1 + 1, for the most part, always going to equal 2, but that's the beauty with science, is that there's so much, one, that we have no idea what's going on. There's all of these questions that we still don't really know the answer to. So there's always this maybe that is what it equals. Maybe it isn't what it equals. And then 2, there's this beautiful limbo of maybe it's, some fudge factor is okay, because it doesn't need to be perfect. Nothing ever needs to be perfect.
Dr. Crawford, I will say that in our history of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, 3,000 broadcasts, we've never had someone say fudge factor or meeting wombat. So thank you for this. We've got 2 completely novel sentiments from someone in one session, which is amazing. Miss Oakley's class, for the first time this has ever worked, I said that if classes don't have a YouTube account, they can't share questions there. Miss Oakley's class sent an email to me. This is amazing, as we were going along. So they're in Rhinebeck, New York, and they'd like to know if rovers are made in one place or multiple places. Are there different facilities that all come together, or what?
Yeah, so it depends, but sometimes they're made in one place and sometimes they're not. So it really depends. But the subsystems, like all those instruments that are doing the really cool science, some of those instruments on top of the rover itself are made with different companies. So they're made with Lockheed Martin or Boeing, and then they come to JPL, and then we assemble them on the spacecraft. So the Curiosity and Perseverance rovers were built at JPL. So they were built in this huge high bay, one of those clean rooms that we were talking about earlier. And all of those different assemblies got put on top of the rover and installed, and then we shipped the rover off to Mars. So most of the work for those was done at JPL, but some of it not so much.
There you go. Great answer. And thanks, Miss Oakley's class, for sharing that way. Miss Miller, I'm coming to you guys one last time live, and then we'll wrap up from there with one final question for Caitlin. But come on in, guys. Take us away. Hey.
We have too many questions, so we're trying to narrow it down.
Yes, I love that. And you can always email us too at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So the same email you apply for this for, email us more questions and we can find you the answers too, by the way. But share one more with us while you're live.
So how does your radar work? So how do you pick up different asteroids and monitor your spacecraft?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we, the NISAR mission, we do have a radar. We actually have 2 radars, which is pretty cool. We aren't looking for asteroids, but we are looking at the surface of the Earth. And so what happens with this is that we basically the spacecraft is in orbit on around the Earth, and it sends a signal down to Earth, and that signal then bounces off of whatever we're trying to look at, whether that be a glacier or whether that be a mountain, and it'll bounce back off. And when it bounces, we're recapturing that signal and saying, this is how much it deflected. Therefore, we can then infer what that mountain or glacier then looks like. So it's a bunch of waves that we send down to look at different elements of the Earth's surface.
Yeah, that was fascinating. We could probably do a whole program just on that specifically. I like the question, guys. Caitlin, before we wrap up, is there a final message you want to leave with kids? You did such a great job in your presentation of sort of summing up everything, but is there something you want to leave our classes with before we wrap up about the work that you do, the upcoming mission, their own potential future in space? I know that's broad, but leave with. Go for it.
I think Jesse said it beautifully, that it is such a great time to be in space. There's so many things that are happening, and I cannot wait for the future of space and what that looks like. I really want to iterate. I think that we think scientists and engineers have to look or act a certain way, and they have to, do science or do math just to get into NASA. And NASA is full of all of these vibrant people that are studying, geophysics or art or communications. And there are so many different ways to be involved in science, to not actually just do science. So, if you're feeling passionate about something, follow that passion.
I love that, Caitlin. And it's been really nice to hear so many NASA engineers, scientists, roboticists talk about this over the last few months. Just the idea that if you want to be a lawyer or a business person or an accountant, or, there's any number of jobs that if you want to be affiliated with an organization doing such amazing work, you have a place at NASA or our Canadian Space Agency for our Canadian friends. I mean, there's the world is your oyster, and I really hope our students take up that mantle and get excited about that. I encourage you all, check out jpl.nasa.gov. Amazing stuff there for Caitlin's work and the entire team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Caitlin, this has been so much fun, and what we do to wrap up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in our class. Miss Simmons has to go for lunch, but Miss Miller's class, if you guys want to unmute your mic and join me in saying a big thank you and farewell, then Caitlin, stick around for me afterwards for a minute. But Miss Miller's class, thank you so much. Caitlin, thank you. Have a wonderful day.